let's unpack and take a quick look at some of the hardware and some of the things that have changed over time on the iPad. Here's what the box typically looks like, a little something like this. And if you pop open the lid, get this baby open, you'll find your iPad in here. I've harvested mine out already. You lift this little thing up and you will find a connector cable that goes from the 30 pin, which I'll refer to quite often, to a USB connection that you could connect in various different ways. One of them is to connect it to this cube right here, this power converter. This just flips up and you can connect the USB side to this right here. Make sure that you have it go in the right direction. This goes into an outlet. This then charges your iPad, and in just a second we'll take a look at where that plugs in. You can even get an extension for this so that the cable can go quite a bit farther if you would like. Before we move on though, that's the basics of what you're going to find in the box of the iPad. Let's take a look at some of the changes that have happened over time with the iPad. This is the first generation iPad, and as you can see, you may not be able to see, but the profile is almost twice as tall. There's quite a bit of a drop off from the 1 to the 2. And then the 2 to 3 is identical. Body style and everything from 2 to 3 are almost identical. We're going to find one small discrepancy as we move through there. But you'll also see, if I flip these over, you're going to see some markings on the back of the iPad here. Can we see that all right? Yes. All right. So it says iPad, but then right down here it's going to tell you what the size of the hard drive is. This is 16 gigabyte. And then one of the other tricky things is this black bar on the back means that it is 3G enabled, or in this case, because this is the iPad 3, or the new iPad rather, this black bar back here means that it has 4G capabilities, 4G data. If you don't see this black bar on your iPad, that means that the whole back is solid silver with the iPad symbol or the Apple symbol in the middle. If it's solid silver on the back or all aluminum, then you do not have a 3G or 4G enabled iPad. Now that we've taken a look at some of those basics, let's take a peek at what we have on the outside of the iPad here. Every single iPad, whether you're looking at the new iPad or the old iPad, and I'm going to take this old iPad, which is the iPad 2, and I'm going to throw it away for just a second here. Whether you're looking at the 1, 2, or 3, they all have some similarities. First off, they have what's called a home button, which you could look at this direction, is actually on the bottom. It's got the square in there. And whenever you press it, it's going to activate or turn your iPad on. It's also going to do a ton of other things that you're going to discover as you go through all of these different video lessons. So that's the home button. That's one of the only things that's on the face of the iPad besides a tiny little camera, which we'll talk about here in just a second. There's a little front-facing camera that they call the FaceTime camera. Let's take a look at the spine of this thing now. So if you take it and you rotate it over, this edge right here, this spine, has two major buttons on it. I don't know if we can see that well or not. We can. So we have a toggle switch right here, which you'll discover can do a couple of different things depending on your preferences. So I call this the toggle switch. Then you have your volume buttons here on the side. Volume down, volume up. And we'll get to take a look at some of those settings a little later on. And if we rotate this thing around like this, now we have that black strip again, or in your case it may be silver. And right here we have the screen mute or on and off switch. All that does is it turns the screen on and off. In some of the diagrams that you may see, this might be called the on-off switch. I hate that name because it doesn't actually turn the iPad on or off. All it does is it turns this screen on or off. And the reason why you'd want to do that is to save yourself some power because the screen eats up a lot of your battery. If you migrate this way a little ways, you're going to see that there's a tiny itty bitty little slit. I'm not sure if the camera can pick that up or not. There's a itty bitty slit right there, which is actually your microphone. So if you follow the camera slot on the front face directly up and over, you'll see that there's a tiny little microphone slit right there. And that's really important to know or to understand if you're doing something like doing a voice recording, or if you're narrating something and you have your hand over it. Obviously you're going to get really terrible microphone quality. But let's just stay on the back side here. If you keep following from the screen switch all the way past the microphone over to what's the headphone jack right here, you'll see that this is a mini auxiliary jack or a headphone jack where you can plug in headphones, and actually there's one more use of it at least with some other accessories, but this is basically called the headphone jack. You then rotate one more time and you have a little tiny reset hole here, and in here, actually this isn't the reset, you push a little pin in there and out pops your SIM card, and your SIM card relates to if you're going to travel overseas or try and change carriers or do something else that you would have to access. The great majority of us will never have to touch either that little hole or the SIM card itself. There's nothing else on this edge, and as I rotate around, we're going to see one of the most important aspects or ports on this entire iPad, and that's that 30-pin port. Let me bring this cable back over here. This one plugs into here, this 30-pin section. So right below that home button, you're going to find where you plug in your 30-pin, any kind of accessory, whether it's a power cord or the camera connector kit that I'm going to show you in a little bit, or a keyboard docking station. Everything goes in and out through this 30-pin port. That's the basics of the outside of the iPad and getting to know the iPad outside, except for, there's one last thing that I promised that I'd show you the difference between the two and the new iPad, and that is the second camera on the back. Notice that the camera is right here by the screen button, and on the old iPad, it is in the same exact place right here. I'll just lay one over the top. You'll notice though that there's one slight difference between the new iPad down here and the iPad 2. The new iPad has a little bit larger camera lens and area because it has a much nicer camera on it. So if you're lucky enough to have one of the new iPads, you'll notice right away that your camera slot is a tiny bit larger. So in recap, we have a camera back here for rear-facing cameras, and then we have the front-facing camera on the front side. That's it for the outside of your iPad.